Our Prabhu Mohapatra today is going to, he's retiring this December. Professor Mohapatra retires this December as the head of Department of History and Dean of Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Delhi. His illustrious career began here at the University of Delhi, where he completed his bachelor's and then his master's in history, followed by his PhD at JNU. He was a fellow at Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. He has held postdoctoral positions at Yale, at SOAS and University of Amsterdam. He was also a visiting fellow at V.V. Giri National Labour Institute, where he started the Integrated Labour History Research Program and was instrumental in setting up the digitized archive of Indian labour. He is the founding member and secretary of the Association of Indian Labour Historians. V.V. Giri and AILS together held the biennial Labour History Conference, which many of us in this room have been part of in different capacities, and was a very interesting grooming ground and a very interesting intellectual space for all of us trying to do labour history. He joined the Department of History, University of Delhi in 2002 as an associate professor. He has taught various courses on modern India, integrating economic and labour histories within a global history framework. During his tenure, he has mentored more than 50 MPhil and PhD students on a range of topics of the colonial and post-colonial periods. He has been a visiting scholar at Ecole Normale Supérieure History Journal of Peasant Studies. His works have been crucial in enhancing our understanding of various aspects of labor regime, culture and relations, labor contracts and law, coerced labor relations, global migration patterns, gender and cultural aspects concerning Indian diaspora in the Caribbean, and global histories of informality. I welcome you all to this session, and I hand over the mic to Professor Prabhu.
अरे बाहर सीट कर लो भाई अरे
and now you have a more free time to see him. And that I say with great depth of feeling, because ever since he joined Delhi University, I'm afraid I haven't seen him. It's as if he fell in love with the university and abandoned all his friends. I hope he hasn't abandoned his family also in the course of it. But the rate at which he's been going, I can't even get him to answer the telephone when I speak. So now I hope after this event I'll be able to speak to him occasionally. Student in the MPhil, I think. Yeah, that was it. But anyway, I just thought of it at that moment, flashed through my mind. And then, as it were, he turned up on my desk, in a sense. He arrived for a course. And the course was interesting in every way. Now, I shall not elaborate upon it. I shall leave Prabhu to tell you stories about it. But I must say one thing. I must warn you before he tells you stories. Since most of you are students here, or a large number are, you know, students do make up things. They like telling stories. They exaggerate. So whatever he says, you must take with a pinch of salt, as you would expect. I am, of course, far beyond exaggeration now. You might wonder, surely I should have been a student at one time. Yes, I was. That was in such a remote past that I reached a state of Buddhahood almost. I've reached the golden mean and absolute objectivity and so on, and I'm unable to exaggerate or make cartoons of anything. I tell the pure truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth all the time. So there it was. Prabhu turned up as my student, and that was a rare and exceptional experience, I must say, and we've been friends ever since. As I saw him working through his doctoral thesis, of course it was a thesis that seemed to be interminable, We were all waiting for the masterpiece to come, and it was coming and coming and coming. But in between, I managed to get an article out of him. Actually, it's not me, it was his supervisor who got him to submit an article to the journal that I was then editing, the Studies in History. It was a superb piece, of course, as we would expect. And I was very happy that we were able to get it out of him. I said, now the thesis. Well, once the articles have come, the next is the thesis. Well, we waited and waited, a decade, I think. But it did. And as would-be Prabhu, who always balances on a tightrope over a precipice, he submitted it on the last day at 1 minute to midnight. And it came through perfectly. But I must say, I read it. I read it very closely, commented on every page, as it were, as I demanded that he should publish it straight away. This is the trouble. Now, being a very rational person, I've become a superstitious one. You see, if I read a thesis and I like it very much, I find it never gets published. And that's what happened to Prabhu's. We are still waiting for it, Prabhu. And I've even forgotten what the subject was. But I'm sure it will appear one day. Of course, it'll be edited by somebody else, he's telling me. I don't see why he needs an editor to do it, but that's how it would be. But but Prabhu is one of those persons who is master of unpublished masterpieces. But while Prabhu might be an anarchist, I think he is, whether he owns up to it or not, we also know something else about him, that he's very anarchic. We always feel that things are falling apart. I mean, the coming of the PhD brought on not merely headaches but breakdowns, I think, in all his circle, except for himself. So everyone is expecting some collapse to occur, some disaster to occur, but it never happens. Prabhu always sees it through. And he turned out to be a superb organizer, I might say. The Association of Indian Naval Historians was his brainchild, and has run on so well for a quarter of a century now. And it holds its regular association conferences, international conferences, where he raises the money, finds the international collaborators, finds the contributors, and finally brings out edited volumes. The whole lot, it's actually single-handed by him, with due respect to others who've helped. But I think he is the inspiring genius of it all. So there's immense organizing ability also, despite that facade of anarchism or anarchic behavior that he puts on. And as you all know, when he's been chairman, dean, and so on, all these good bureaucratic posts, these are jobs he's discharged with exceptional ability and thoroughness in every way. I've not been the beneficiary of it, but I can expect, I know what he is like. But on top of that, he's, as you know, and you've heard, a genuinely global scholar who's widely networked in the centers of scholarship within India, outside India. I think the only country he misses out is Russia. Perhaps Putin doesn't quite welcome him at this stage. But otherwise, everywhere. But if Europe goes the way it is going, and America, he may not be welcome there also in short order. But the scholarship is of such excellent and stimulating kind that he is not only welcomed everywhere, he contributes enormously everywhere, that you all know them. And he's got a vast number of publications, as you know. Now, having said all these good things about him, I'm not pronouncing any eulogy. Eulogy you do after the person's ended his life, and Prabhu's nowhere near it. And that's the one thing I'm not going to tolerate. I expect him to pronounce the eulogy on me, not the other way around. There's sufficient difference between us in age for that to happen. But I must follow one convention. I must point out imperfections. it was a convention in the, amongst the great masters of art who did those wonderful illustrated miniature paintings that we know so well and admire in museums and so on. But they always had to put in an imperfection in their work. Only God can be perfect. And so, with my warmest greetings to you, and looking forward to now a very creative phase after Delhi University, with more publications, and your thesis finally, I hope, will be out, if not other books of that kind. And greetings to everybody for organizing such a wonderful meeting, and it's so heartening to see Prabhu being greeted by such a large audience here. With that, let me thank you all and thank Prabhu for his friendship over the years, and we look forward to many more years to come.
Okay, good evening all of you, and I need to explain some things about my the kind of title I've given. I think many people think it is some kind of a, and many might, including my students, might have thought this is some very, very new thing Prabhu is going to speak about, and it's not very much, nothing of the sort. But I must begin first by thanking my department, and thanking especially Mohapatra and the seminar committee, which invited me to speak here. I might say that I have never spoken in my department. This is so I'm really thankful to you, Mohapatra, and to the seminar committee for giving me the chance to speak, even if it at the end of the day or end of my innings here in the department. I know I feel bad about it. I have had a wonderful time in the department for the last 22 years when I came in. I never thought I would be a teacher. I really never thought I would be a teacher. I was happily gallivanting and kind of a free bird structure, not knowing what will happen, not at all bothered about it. Of course, but for the fact that Subrita was already doing a job actually meant that I was free to do whatever I felt, and that she took on most of the responsibility. But so this is the time for me to thank all my colleagues for their warmth, for the generosity, for the kindness, and for their intellectual breadth, so that I have learnt a lot from all of you, each one of you. I have learnt a lot. Because I wanted to say this, and that's a point I want to make. Why did I call myself, or why am I an interloper? Rahul is smiling. Rahul thinks it's a fake moniker that I have taken on. But so it's a fact. I am an interloper, and I always felt that I am an interloper, and that's because I was never properly trained in history. And that's something I still feel completely overawed and awed by each one of you when I see the quality of your work, see my teachers, my friends, all of them, and I feel I really have something very badly missing in my makeup. And that feeling of being an interloper has always stayed. And that has to do with the fact that when I came 50 years back, I came to Delhi at the age of 15 to study physics. And I had no intention, I had given history such a wide berth that there was no way that I was going to know history at all. And it didn't occur it was not in my radar at all. It was only to do physics that I came in. And I was wide-eyed, I had just seen this, and I was looking at all the photographs of all the Nobel. Okay, so that remained, I think. And as I said, bad physicists become top economists, but I think bad physicists, as it turned out, haven't become top historians, excepting Dipesh Chakravarti, of course, who was a physics student, and Ravindra Kumar, another, was a chemistry student. And so there are some exceptions to this rule, but I would put myself in the sense I was not very good at physics. That's why I had to, though I got a first class, but that is not a thing. I really could not really fathom pure abstractions, you know. I was good at some parts of it, but I wasn't good. So, and then I spent 2 years doing history, and I wouldn't have done history if I hadn't joined Ramjas College, where I did physics, and if I hadn't met Dilip Sibian. It was actually Dilip who was teaching history that time, who completely kind of, you know, opened my mind to something else. Not history per se, but his, and I feel bad that Dilip is not here, is not very well, but I'm sure Dilip is somewhere watching this. But Dilip was the reason I veered away from my desire to become a Nobel laureate in physics. And not only that, it was Dilip who first exposed me to or brought me books and things to read, which was so much beyond my ken that time that, you know, and he didn't bother whether I knew anything before that. All the latest books that he had read, he had got from wherever from that. I don't know why he took a liking to me, and that I think changed the way I have been. So part of the thing which Madhavan said just now about my being an anarchist has to do with my my relationship with Dilip and being exposed to Dilip's influence. And I want to acknowledge that was the best thing that has happened to me. Whatever else has happened to me, the best thing that happened to me that I knew Dilip, and Dilip really genuinely widened my way of looking things, and it was with him that I finally gave up physics. And he wasn't saying that you do history, but I somehow wandered into history and doing masters. And I must say I studied in masters in Delhi University in a college where I got admission. That college has vanished. It was the postgraduate evening college. It was got wiped out in a flood once. So none of my degrees or my mark sheets exist. I have no record in the history department. But the fact was that this is where I was taught by the best historians. And I don't think I properly took. It was Sumit Sarkar and Randhir Singh whom I studied. I attended maybe 20 classes, all from Sumit's class. And that's all. And I did a bunch of Chinese history courses, all by my friend Amar and all, who were doing high quality courses with PhD, Patsarthi Gupta. And I just muddled through my masters. And I didn't know what. So when I came, I wanted to tell you this. I came in as a 15-year-old, exactly 2 days after emergency had been declared. I was completely innocent of what happened in. It took me 2 years to actually realize what the hell is happening to our country at that time. And I was part of the thing when the emergency was lifted, and I was right here in Delhi University when these huge meetings in Ramlila Maidan took place. And that first time my sense of, expansion into a public world and to feel the collective sense was ignited. But then after my masters, I wanted to go to JNU, or did go to JNU. That's where I would say that a few of my, first was the fact that I still felt that I really had no knowledge what to do with history. What am I going to do in film? What am I going to do? What kind of courses would I do? It was Sabyasachi Bhattacharya, who was the economic. I somehow liked economic history, partly trained by Sumit, and I thought, well, that is something I can do. And I didn't know what, but that's when I met Niladri, who was already a teacher, and Bappa and Madhavan. In some sense. Sabyasachi Bhattacharya, whom I never called Bappa, but he was universally known as Bappa. And Bappa, I think they took pity on me, I think. And I have to tell what, they took pity on this completely floundering chap who had no idea what he was doing. I could speak, I could talk a bit, but that about all. I really hadn't studied history properly. And when when I went to Madhavan's class first, you can't imagine, I thought I must prove that I can do it. I first paper I wrote, it was supposed to be, I was supposed to write 2,000 word paper. I worked so hard, I wrote 52 pages. It was on fascism, forces on fascism. And mine, I still know everything about fascism from my readings from that time in Madhavan's class. And so the time for grading comes, and Madhavan, first I opened, I was happy. I thought I would be getting, somewhere. Madhavan was very famous for not giving good grades. Not giving good grades, being very strict with his grades. But I thought I would, lo and behold, the first thing I say, I've got a C. And that's what I first time saw on the side of the word I learned. I'd never heard this word. That is tawdry. Tawdry. What the hell? I'd written 52 pages and I'm getting a C. I got a C. I was shocked. I had first class throughout my life, and I said, what is this? I really fought hard with him. I fought really hard. I said, no, I've done this right. He said, it's just after I think 4 pages, he said, this is where you should have stopped. And I had just begun. I thought, how can you? He said, I would read this. You're supposed to write in 2,000 words, you've written 52 pages, that's not there. I won't read it. You won't do it. Whatever, you have brilliant ideas, but you had to do it within 2,000 words. I think that's when he, finally took pity on me and gave me a B. So after really maybe 3 hours of debating with him and trying to, no, I was not, I thought I deserved more, so I was fighting. But he said he was very calm, and anyway, that is what, that was my first experience of being taught by proper historians. I was being taught by historians, but to mean what it means to do history, in what way should it be done, I had really no. Anyway, to do a PhD, that is when I thought I would do, and Niladri and all were already teaching, but they were also doing, all of them were doing PhD, and those are the days of doing agrarian history. Because it was the end of the big debates in Indian economic history or Indian political economic history, which was about mode of production debate, and everyone was doing ideas of. Gopi is here. Gopi is the last of our agrarian historians. So we had a group of people who were doing agrarian history under Sabyasachi. Right. What I want to do is to just take you through this thing about my feeling being an outsider, an interloper. And I wanted to tell you this. Hello. I being an outsider, an interloper, what I meant. That not only was I coming from a discipline with which I had some kind of a familiarity with certain types of methods, certain way of doing things. Then I'm brought in here, I was completely unfamiliar with many of the ways of doing textual analysis, the close reading of archival studies. I saw that feeling of incompleteness has remained throughout. I always feel that I'm Hello? Huh? Hello? Huh? Okay. So I'll get through this very quickly. So this is, but JNU was more than classroom. History I learned in the class was fantastic, but more I learned was outside. All these students, peer group that time were amazing, and many of them I all here. And I learned whatever I've learned from sitting outside in JNU. Outside the library or outside, not so much inside the library, I must say. But it is, so this is, how do I tell you, this is my bit of a journey into history. And if it would have been impossible if I hadn't got the support of my friends, but most importantly my teacher, Sabyasachi Bhattacharya. And actually I don't know why he somehow managed to pull me through most terrible times. And of course, I befriended Madhavan Palak, and Madhavan's continuous urging, Prabhu, put some structure. Prabhu, put some structure. You got very good at it. Put some structure, Prabhu, put some structure. And I don't know whether I reacted to it positively or not, but I think it seeped into me that I play into this messiness, or the messiness of history, which I always found very messy, and from there coming to the feeling that the structure that I'm putting on history and historical material is always an artifice, always artificial. I had this continuous feeling, again another feeling of being an interloper. I really did feel that I was organically dealing with it. But it is something of what Madhavan's way of saying, look, it will always appear artificial, but that is it. That is how it is. The structure is the way to, you have to structure it, Prabhu, you have to structure it. And anyway, it was Niladri, sorry, it would appear as if it was Niladri passion was just being there, and the way Niladri could re-articulate all our ideas and bring it out, as if, even if he didn't agree with you, your ideas, give it a shape and bounce it back at you. And I think that these are the kind of experiences, apart from my lots of friends who in politics and which has been very good there. But I remain, as I say, an outsider. So let me begin my now that I've given you some idea. I'm already 19 by when I joined JNU, or 20 I suppose. I joined JNU, and I might say that I was continuously worried that am I doing the right thing, and I couldn't particularly understand a lot of things, and I want to share some of this. It's a day for confessions, huh? Please bear with me. Yeah. After saying that I wasn't at all a proper historian, I always had this problem. The most important problem that I faced: how do you create from facts meanings? I knew it is something to do with meanings, but how do, and history had to do with facts. That was, any class 3 student knew that history is about facts. But from facts, how do you generate meaning? I was genuinely perplexed, because as a physicist, or whatever training I had in physics, there was always the thing that between your whatever experimental facts, there is a hypothetical machine operation that you do on this, and I was not sure what operation we do in order to bring out meanings from there. So I want to tell you, I want to take you through my understanding of or the way I handle in my own way how to do history, and I realized that I'm not doing history in the standard way at all, which is that you do study and develop structures and apply certain theoretical knowledge, or in some ways. But I was always stuck with this. Is my the way I'm doing, is it right? Because I thought I did everything wrongly, what I did. And I want to give you some examples of this. And I want to say, in this long journey of an interloper, I want to, it looks like a nice, is there a method in the madness? So, let's say, I'm not saying madness, but I always found actual history pretty messy. Nothing, moment you start doing, it always somehow went away from me. I didn't get it so many times. That's when, in 1980, as immediately after I had joined, I chanced upon the first, and JNU used to have brilliant, in the history workshop, there's an article by Carlo Ginzburg. And that really kind of shook me up, and I think I learned a lot from there. what constitutes, what do historians do actually? And that's what, when I said, what he meant by that, that actually, apart from historians do look at facts, but how do they generate meaning? How do they get to the meaning? And the method he used to show was a series of examples drawn from Neolithic times to the contemporary period on how historians don't just do by gathering a lot of facts and then putting a theory on it and then generating, but rather by making a leap of faith through what he called a conjunctural paradigm. And I want to talk a little bit about it. That from the fact to the meaning, you make it, there is actually an abyss, a big gap between facts and meaning. And it remains there, even if you can string a lot of facts together and add a narrative sequencing to it, it still remains. How do you get that meaning? And that there, I think the kind of thing I got from Carlo Ginzburg. I hadn't read Ginzburg at all till then. That was my first article. Ginzburg, as you know, this book of his, I hadn't read that, Cheese and Worms. But this article, which connected the work of Morelli, an art historian, Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, Morelli, and Freud. And he put them together to find out So what he did was what he calls a process of conjecture. And it is from there, and my first reading influenced very much by Ravi Vasudevan. Ravi is a great cinema enthusiast, and Ravi taught me whatever little about looking at cinema, but I read some cinema theory also because of him. And the thing which really fascinated me was Eisenstein's montage. Okay, Eisenstein's theory of montage. There I found how meaning is generated if you put together two disparate things. Ginsberg was telling me that you can generate an image or a representation by jumping from a footprint of a paws or a pug mark of an animal to that. That's what the Neolithic hunters did, and that's exactly what historians do. They make that leap and create this structure, this image and representation. So through and the second in Eisenstein's way, which is most famously in the montage theory. Can you go in next slide?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Eisenstein, I was interested in juxtaposition, bringing together disparate facts, and that juxtaposition produces a surplus of meaning and excessive meaning. Then I read Paul Feyerabend again against method, an anarchist theory of knowledge, which was in 1982, and again this is Dilip's book that I was very impressed with that, and I particularly like his critique of history of science and saying actually anything goes, and a kind of long historical science, anything. I'll just explain it little. Carlo Ginzburg's idea of conjecture, then reading Agnes Heller of theory of history about that historians actually derive not from a full-scale story but from traces and documents. Okay, from traces, exactly like the pug mark of the thing, you derive the structure of the story of that. And then Marshall Charlin's idea of especially this Captain Cook's death. I was in Islands of History in 1985. I was pretty much struck by what he showed as coincidences. How coincidences can happen and produce particular type of meaning.
And finally, I think I found a way of understanding through Charles Peirce's understanding of account of semiotics, in which the idea was kinds of reasoning which we are familiar with, deductive and inductive reasoning. He called a third type of reasoning, which is abductive reasoning. Abduction, which is a way in which you don't, in deduction, you come from the general to the particular. You derive already well-known thing in your premises, you derive from there, you deduce from there. In induction, you generalize from facts or from series of facts, a small sample of facts to a large general. But abduction is a way in which, and that's what historians perhaps do, that's what I think Carlo Ginzburg was telling me, that abduction is a way in which we look at something which is what he called as a plausible way of things, plausibility. That means, unlike or if we marry Paul Feyerabend's argument with Charles Peirce's abduction, anything goes, but it has to be in some way controlled through plausibility, not certainty, but plausibility. So traces, plausibility, and conjecture, coincidences. These became my way of handling the messy question of how do you move from this to fact, from facts, and to generate coherent meaning. Okay, can we go back? Next one. Well, this is a little bit just before that. I just want to show very briefly a tribute to the great Odessa steps, where the Montas question. This is Sergei Eisenstein's movie, 1925, Battleship Potemkin, in which this is there. Where Eisenstein's theory is that two different disparate images can be brought together to produce a third meaning, that meaning which is not there in either of these. It comes in the third. Can you play this? Is it there? Just a bit. So this is a great scene from the Odessa steps. This is where, I don't know, you must have seen it millions of times in different derivative sequences. Anyway, I can't show you this, but it's a great sequence when you see the last thing with the child, the pram going down. And anyway, this is, I don't want to, if you are aware of this film and you know what he's doing, and Eisenstein wrote a lot about this and also wrote and did great films later. And many people, but I was struck by the fact that one could, by putting together oppositional facts or oppositional, juxtaposing oppositional structures, can generate meaning in some sense. Okay, you can go back. Go. So Feyerabend's the only principle that does not inhibit progress is anything goes. And Feyerabend's book Against Method was primarily to show and to somehow to take away the idea of what he said. It's called the anarchist, an outline of an anarchist theory of knowledge. And Feyerabend's theory, and his example was Galileo. And he showed that Galileo didn't totally overturn the so-called Copernican revolution, or to overturn the old ideas about the Earth moving around the sun, and so on and so forth. What he did, he didn't overturn the stationary Earth paradigm. He showed how often Galileo, and anyone who's seen breasts of Galileo would realize that Galileo didn't totally, he talked in the language of the old, and in fact continued talking in the language of the old, never fully challenging it, but in the end providing and in some sense. So what the book was trying to show that the great revolutions in scientific revolution haven't occurred through accretions of knowledge or through revolutionary moments, but has happened often by using languages of the old, and those have been the things we have shifted. Okay. Next. Next, please.
Next slide.
Yeah. Anyway, this is another. I wanted to quote that the past was not meant to recognize how it really was. I was never happy. I was never happy just merely saying what it was. It was not at all my thing. I really liked it. It means to take control of a memory as it flashes in a moment of danger. For historical materialism, it is a question of holding fast to a picture of the past, just as if it had unexpectedly thrust itself in a moment of danger on the historical side. So again, it's not about looking at it or the large structures and so on and so forth, but this the question of the moment of danger, and that has always been by, or at least I took a lot. So next one. Yeah. All right. So indirect based on science and scraps of evidence, not script, scraps of evidence, and is conjunctural. Now, conjectural and conjunctural and coincidences. These are the three words that I would, and principal juxtaposition. These are, and traces and document. These are the keywords of my an interloper's way of trying to handle history. Next one. Okay, I just want to take away from Agnes Heller's book on theory of history, which actually gives this example of Captain Grant's Children, 1867 book by Jules Verne. The story is a wonderful story about finding of a bottle which is found in the abdomen of a shark, which is caught there, and in the bottle there are messages. But the messages have been because the water had entered the bottle, and you only have traces, some little things. From there, like a true historian, they start piecing together where they could be, where this, and from that they realize that this is a shipwreck, and a Captain Grant has been wrecked, and he is somewhere, and they find by comparing the English message and the German and the French message, and all of them are in pieces, and they picked up only a few scraps of that, and then they go through a series of connections and series of travel to find this Captain Grant. They go on to Patagonia first. The children of Captain Grant, along with this Lord Glenveagh, Scottish lord, and in the ship they go through several places. They go through South America, then they go to Australia, to New Zealand, and looking for this. And everywhere they just miss that. They miss that. And as they reconstruct historically and where they could find uncertainty through the deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning, they often fail. Okay, they fail. And ultimately, of course, the book has a good ending, happy ending. They find Captain Grant, but totally by chance. Totally by chance. The story is wonderful because it's got all this struggle of finding through piecing together evidence and then looking for the result, but the result comes to them purely by chance, purely through contingency, purely through chance that they find. Next one. This is another one from Marshall Shahalian's book, which is about in which is it originally came out in the book series of essays. Marshall Shahal is a great
anthropologist who's dead now, and it's about and here I want to say that Shalins looked at Captain Cook's death, and his argument was, and that's became very controversial. His argument was in Hawaii, when Captain Cook was coming, he's initially treated very well. He's treated very well, and people are, they give him food and all kinds of. Because according to Shalins, he had entered in a cycle of a festival of gods, when the gods move around the islands in a circle, and he had come around in that cycle, and they, according to Shalins, the natives thought that he was God, and then when he goes off, then he had a problem with his ship. He's given a big farewell, and because it's in the cycle, he goes. But what happens? He has a ship problem, so he comes back. When he comes back, he actually is he goes not in the clockwise direction, he comes back in the anti-clockwise direction. And then the pure hostility of because he had unknowingly transgressed the idea of this. So if a bad coincidence leads to a godlike figure being killed, as it happens, he's killed in the. Now this led to a huge controversy, because Gananatha Ovasekere, another anthropologist, said the white men always think that the natives always think that the white man is a god, and so on. So, but that I'm not taking sides with that debate. But this is a very interesting way in which Shalins, who's a very sensitive anthropologist, I was really impressed with his Stone Age economics, where he shows the idea of coincidences. You know, this coincidence is a bad coincidence, but this is the question of coincidence. Coincidence. Okay, and that's the God that they're talking about, Lono. Anyway, next one. So now, after having given a brief, I want to tell you, I want to go through a little bit, give me 15 minutes, and I'll quickly go through how I have done history and what has been my way of having done history. And I know it is terrible. I did not begin many ways. And I'll tell this story. I did a PhD on Chotanagpur, on the tribal region of Chotanagpur. The reason I did it on Chotanagpur because I was born in Chotanagpur. I grew up in Chotanagpur. That is in Jharkhand. I grew Okay. So this is at the beginning of my research, and I had no idea. I had to give to Bappa my first paper, seminar paper, which was to be my thesis, something to do with my thesis. I had no idea what I was going to do. I had really no idea. There was Rana Behel, my friend Rana Behel at that time. He was not my friend then, but he was working. He was working on his PhD with Sabasati, and he was working on Assam tea gardens. And I remember talking to him, I said, "Do you know anything?" So he said, yes, lots of people from Chotanagpur come to Assam. And here, those days people had this research cards. And he had taken down a set of figures of annual migration from Chotanagpur to Assam. So I had this one big thing. Wow, I have this. But what do I do with this? What do I do? I have to deliver it within a very short period, and I didn't know what to do for it. I remember telling me.
The mic very close.
Okay. So where should I? So I go to the archives, not knowing what to hear. They told me there is K.L. Datta's inquiry into rise of crisis. I had this big thing, and I opened the thing. This is all figures of hundreds of figures of. But the first figure was about rainfall. I picked up all the rainfall data. I didn't know what to do with it, but I took it. And I thought maybe if I put the rainfall data alongside the data of migration, I'll get something. It will be something. I knew a bit of statistics, and I thought maybe I can do some correlation and all. But unfortunately, the rainfall data had no total rainfall data had nothing to do with it. I put out in the graph and it had nothing to do with it. But because I have taken down every rainfall data month-wise, I suddenly found that I put the month of October rainfall data alongside the figure of, you can't see that thing. It was very strange that it was the October rainfall in Chotanagpur which was directly correlated with the migration. That is not the total rainfall, nor any other factors that I could see. I could find that it was the rainfall only of this month. I had no idea why this was. I first saw this. Hello? Hello? So this is the blue thing that you see are October rainfall data, and that's the annual micro. I'm just doing it. It's not to scale. I've just put it up. So this was what my first putting together two things which I had no idea, and then I start fitting a theory. It is a very wrong thing to do. I know in science you would have been built that your hypothesis should be derived from a theoretical structure. Then you look at it. I had no way of doing it. I put together this two things. I saw something happening. I said, now I must find a theory of why it is happening so. And it's from there that I derived the theory. That, and it was very unusual to why only in this, because the other thing that I quickly found that this was a period of massive expansion of rice cultivation. Chotanagpur was undergoing a massive expansion of rice cultivation. This was also a period of huge migration. This is also a period of big political movement, like Birsa Munda's movement. So, why would there be migration when there is expansion of rice? And from this, I could then try and fit out, and that became the core of my thesis, is that, and which was counterintuitive, which is totally counterintuitive on my part, or any part, that it was the October rainfall was an indicator. If there was no October rainfall, you would have, especially the rice of the newly cultivated rice areas will suffer the most. And Chotanagpur, and this expansion of rice took place despite the landlords not allowing it. And wherever, in fact, that is what was turned out to be, that wherever landlords actually could not control the expansion, and because they were actually doing, actually they were expanding. In fact, it is from those areas that most migration, because those are the areas in which, so in a strange way, it was not due to, it was in the areas in which they had succeeded and thwarted the landlords, not in which they had been kind of stopped by landlords. Where they had been stopped expanding, they do not migrate. It is precisely in the where they succeed in going against the landlord and succeed, that is where they migrate. So it became the core of my thesis, and to explain in many ways, to bring together a more complex understanding how ecological shifts and changes played out through class conflict, or conflict between landlords and tenants in the city. So again, this, as I said, I fitted the theory afterwards. I didn't start with the theory to fit it. It began from there. Yeah. Next one. So that became the core of my thesis, and this is what. So after that, I did a research now, not only from people who had gone from Assam, but people gone from Chotanagpur, but people in Assam, once there in Assam, and they were taken to Assam under indenture system. And again here, and this is again another thing, while trying, and as I said, I was never satisfied with just merely telling what has happened. I needed to have a problem. And what is the problem? The problem was, strangely, the government had given enormous powers to the planters to free them from regulation, so that they can get as many people at as low a price as possible, and give them a very, very low price and make them work as hard as possible. And in fact, that led to a huge expansion of tea cultivation. But what I found that, and this is what I mean, that at some point in 20 years' time, when this huge expansion had taken place, okay, so what I found that in their effort to cheapen labor, actually it led to higher mortality, higher desertion. In many ways, they had to, and it led to higher cost of recruiting labor. So this is, I found this reversal of a normally expected thing, what I call high cost of so this is my this is a piece I wrote in the 90s, but now I had moved from Assam to work amongst laborers who had migrated from India to West Indies. And again, part of it was serendipity, that I found records purely because I was looking at Assam. I found some records of on questions of wife murder. Suddenly I was wondering why this wife murder, so I followed it up. But as it happened, as I studied, I want to just show you a particular pattern and a particular explanation of problems that I did in this. Okay. So in 1884 in Trinidad, the biggest festival amongst Indian laborers was Muharram, Tazia. And it's in the Tazia of 1884, when they're taking out, the government had banned the procession of Tazia. The Tazia was called the Jose because they were to shout, "Hi Hassan, hi Hussein." From there, Jose became the word for the festival. The festival was celebrated by all Indians, about 85% Hindus, 50% Muslims, most of them Sunni Muslims. So it's not a Shia festival, it was a festival of Hindus celebrating alongside. And this festival, in 1883-84, had been banned by the government. And in 1884, when the government, when these people went on a procession, they refused to go back. They were not allowed to go inside the town. The towns were where the planters stayed, and they were shot down. That's about 22 people were killed. That was for a long time, and most of them killed were Hindus, few only Muslims, 5 Muslims, 17 Hindus, 90% of the injured were Hindus, and so on and so forth. So one of the things that the problem was, why did it happen? Why was this? So the problem which had been set by the colonial narrative itself was that, or the colonial commission's inquiry, is that it had to do with the way that because of lack of control over these people, they have become too assertive. Just like because now, say from Bihar, people are doing Chhat Puja and they have no control over it, and they are asserting themselves, their cultural assertion. And it specifically, through several evidences, tried to show that it had nothing to do with the conditions of work. But while looking at it, I found that there were several small strikes which took place in this period. And all the strikes were taking place during the months of October and September. Now, these strikes were small strikes. People would go to the town, the Indian laborers carrying their instruments of work, and to complain to the magistrate. And they will go through along the highway, and other people can see them. But these were all small strikes. Nearly 52 such small strikes, small and big strikes, happened in this 2-year period, all within the month of September and October. Now, while looking at it, I found that Jose, which had happened first time in 1855, in October, month of October in 1855, first time it was celebrated in Trinidad, had happened in October 30th. And since lunar calendar is followed by Muslim festival, every year it came 11 days, and exactly 30 years later, after 330 days, it was again falling in the month of October. And it was the month of October which had developed a kind of a strike season, and this is where the combination of strike season. So again here, I was looking at and putting together something which I was finding which had not been which had been explicitly taken away from the commissions of inquiry in the narrative, the link between the strike season and the coming of the festival. What made it possible why did this the strike suddenly became so important and so fearsome for the planters? Because the meanings of class conflict in the plantations, which were reflected in the small strikes, got magnified and connected to the Mohharram procession. So the Mohharram procession became a way of amplifying the strike and it's through this connection that I developed a understanding of the concept. Again, here it is to juxtaposing two different sides and also looking at coincidences and contingencies that I found a structural reason why the strike of Jose happened. The last two examples I give of my work, which is next one is, can you go to the next one? Before that. So this is an essay. In the meanwhile, I had moved to a study of informal labor, and that was partly also by my intuition that why is the plantation labor, which is highly organized, was it an informal sector labor or was it a formal sector labor? Because there was fixed salary, there was health report, but I knew it was a form of informal structure. So what happens when I again brought together two things. It was initially always thought of that informal is that which is not regulated by the state. That was what the definition of informal labor. Even today, informal labor is that which is outside the purview of state regulation. So those who want to bring the state, they want to say that state should enter and bring it more, and informal, to make formal is to allow the state to bring it. But what I found is, what I use the neologism regulated informality. That means the opposition between regulation and informality is not so stark. It is not the absence of regulation, but precisely informality is produced through a particular type of regulation. So I showed the history of regulation of labor market, which produces, including that of the plantation labor, which produces a type of informality. And this is one of the, I think, my contribution to a burgeoning field in labor history, in order to bring it out of purely an account of how distressed people are, that they are the working conditions. But the answer to that often has been that there should be more state pressure. If, on the other hand, what I found that state was at the heart of creation of this informality. And this is, again, a counterintuitive way of bringing together two opposed structures and phenomena. One is regulation, other is informality, and bringing them together, it produces a different way in which the question of informality could be handled. The last one is what I wrote, where again the question was called from contract to status, which is about my work on trying to understand what is the nature of the transformation which happened under colonial rule insofar as labor was concerned. One of the answers had been, a dominant answer had been, that there was a persistence of status like caste, religion, those conditions prevailed throughout, and the British effort to bring contractual relations, which are relations based on equality, failed because of the persistence of the state with each other. If you open up contract, you will find status, and if you open up status, you will find contract. This particular intricate relationship, instead of opposition, once you bring them together, you see a new way of understanding particular informal labor history. I'm sorry I've taken a lot of time, but part of it is I needed to unburden myself, especially that Madhavan said that he hadn't heard there for a long time, and I thought, and for all of you, I'm sorry for all the disturbances, because this is what I intended. Thank you.
Prabhu and I have shared a personal and intellectual friendship for over the last 40 years. I still remember the day that I was attending a discussion, a meeting with Tariq Ali, I think, where after the meeting, a very thin, young, bearded student with sparkling eyes came up and talked to me and said, Dilip Simeon has asked me to meet you. So from that time on, we became friends. And over the years, we have read each other's work, commented on each other's drafts, and in many different ways encouraged each other to think creatively and work on newer themes that we are interested in. So we were each other's sounding boards, and in many different ways we provoked each other and incited each other to meditation. So I'm really glad that I'm here today to respond to Prabhu's talk. The categories and terms with which he is thinking about history and the variety of ways he wants to rethink the method of the historians. In fact, if you hear him in his talk and think of what he's offering, we get a picture of how history has moved over the last 40 years. In the 1970s, when we were students, we couldn't think of celebrating coincidence, conjecture, accident in the way that Prabhu is doing. To be an interloper was not something to celebrate. So Prabhu's presentation of his method, I see the transformation of history and historiography over the last 30-40 years. So I'd like to think through some of the categories which he's already been, which he has offered, and see how these categories actually help us think of history in different ways. First, that he's trying to suggest, and he wishes to suggest, that he's an interloper. The question is he an interloper? And if he is, in what sense is he an interloper? Can interloping be something we celebrate or something we should be suspicious of? I think he's using the term interloper in two different ways. One is an interloper who moves from physics to history. Dipesh Chakrabarti has done it, Prabhu has done it, Endeavor has done it. But that's not really being an interloper, because you are moving to a new discipline and you embrace that discipline, you become part of the discipline, you think through the categories of that discipline. So that's the movement. You can be productive because you carry with you an expertise, that is your knowledge of mathematics or physics and other things, into a field where you can utilize that, use that, and more creatively. So that's one way in which we mark a transition. Dipesh has done that also very creatively. But there can be an interloper in a different sense. The idea of the interloper, if you see in a more conceptual and interloper in a more conceptual sense, in a more theoretical sense, is a person who strays, a person who refuses to be bound by the disciplines in which they are located, a person who has one foot on different disciplines. It's not somebody who's got incorporated, who's shifted from one discipline to another, but who refuses to be bound by the established norms and rules and boundaries of the discipline. He has one foot on physics or chemistry, another foot on history, one on psychoanalysis, a third on sociology, a fourth on geography or cartography, etc., etc. it is what Louis Febvre talked of when he talked of straying beyond the discipline, refusing to be tied down by the boundaries set up to divide the disciplines from each other. So in that sense, moving beyond is an act of rupture. It is refusing to be bound, it is refusing to conform, it is refusing to be an insider. It is to define that I am inside but I'm also outside. And therefore all those who are the established structures of discipline, the hegemonic powers within the discipline see you as an outsider, refuse to see you as an insider, but you remain at that in-between space between the inside and you remain at that in-between space between the inside and the outside, and it is in that in-between space that you find creativity. It is precisely that interface which allows you to inhabit a space yet not be constrained by that space. It is in this sense, I think, being an outsider and being an interloper is a creative thing. And I would like to believe that it is in that sense that Prabhu is an interloper. He's always moving between disciplines. He's always appropriating the ideas and insights from different disciplines in order to think through what he wishes to think through, the project that he has. It is in that sense, I think, we should refuse to be always an insider. Because being outside allows that maneuverability, that space, which allows you creativity, which allows you to think through in ways that, and being inside doesn't allow you. So Prabhu's idea of being interloper is extremely important. So it is in that sense that being an interloper is not a bad thing. Is not a bad thing. So we don't have to feel sad of being an interloper. Prabhu, when he talked about interloping, there was a pathos that Bichara, I was an interloper. But there was also a celebration. So there was a tension between the two. And that tension is something which is good. But I don't think that we need to be sad about being an interloper. It can be very good. Not being an insider, not being bound down by the structures of the discipline. So the creative impulses, and the question of inside and outside also raise other questions. It raises questions about authority. Who has the authority to speak? Who has the right to be a historian? Who cannot speak as a historian? And I think that claim to authority is both at one level important, but at another level it is problematic. It is important because you can become, you can refuse to be bound down by the authority, you can question that authority, and you can resist that authority, but you also have to conform to certain norms which allow you, and that is a point I would like to develop, which allow you to think of the discipline in new ways and refigure and rework the norms of the discipline, but not be completely unbound by all norms. And this leads me to the question of trace that he's talking about, and the significance and the power of the category trace. History, one can say, is a knowledge by trace. It is the traces from the past which allow us to access that past. We cannot return to the past if the past leaves no trace. And if the traces are lost, then that past is lost. Only that past survives at the moment with us if we have traces for that past. So this means that traces are important for historians to relate to. But the traces are not the past. Traces do not give us unmediated access to the past. It is not as if the past resides in the trace in a form which you have to only discover the trace and you discover the past. It means that we have to read, historians have to read the trace, interpret the trace, understand the trace. And that's something which Heller is talking about, which Paul Ricoeur is talking about. And Heller argues that this leads to a question of responsibility. That is, the historian has to responsibly and honestly read the past. If you do not read the past honestly, then you produce ideology. Then you manufacture histories which is not history, which actually looks at the past, which is something which produces a story of the past for a future. And you cannot look to the future in order to look at the past in that form. Therefore, honesty is important. Therefore, responsibility is important. It is totalitarians and those who do not respect the past who actually use the past in order, in Agnes Heller and others' argument, who use the past to produce ideologies. So, in that sense, trace is extremely important in developing our notion of what the history is, and we need to understand that these traces are not simply disconnected, unmediated fragments from the past. What we need to do is to connect those traces, and that is the connection that Prabhu was talking about, that we need to connect the traces together to create a coherent story. And that's the function of the historian. The traces survive. The past is not simply in the traces. The story doesn't come to us simply by looking at the traces. The story is something which the historian does, and Prabhu is talking about how he proceeds to do it, by connecting the traces to discover a pattern, to see an association, to discover a structure from within the analysis of those traces. So this leads to the question of the third set of ideas that Prabhu is playing with, the question of coincidence, the question of accident, the question of contingency that he is celebrating. What exactly is a coincidence? When we talk of coincidence, we can't take it for granted that the meaning of coincidence is given. Coincidence is a way of looking at something. It is not just a coincidence, it is that which we can't comprehend within the existing structures of thought. That which we cannot comprehend because our existing frame of reference doesn't allow us to comprehend that. So when you understand it is no longer a coincidence. So what happens is that those who think of coincidence as a point of entry for a historian are arguing that what is incomprehensible, what we cannot understand, an event which we cannot think through, is an event we should begin to explore. What appears as a coincidence is interesting because the normal, rational, linear, seamless explanation of things does not explain that. And therefore, because it is outside that linear unfolding of history or linear explanation that we have, seemingly rational explanation, therefore that is seen as coincidence. So this focus on the coincidence gives us a different vantage point. A vantage point which is different from the point of view of the dominant frame of reference at any one time, which historians and others would be suspicious of focusing on the coincidence. Therefore, the micro events, the erratic events, the seemingly irrational, the seemingly incomprehensible become our point of entry. And coincidence, in this sense, is an interruption. That is, it is an interruption in the linear flow of history or time. It is an interruption in the flow of time which we can see as comprehensible within the frames or given frames of teleological linear explanation. And this interruption, which disrupts the flow, which in some sense is therefore singular and unique, this interruption is what we can focus on. And that's what Prabhu is trying to suggest, that is an interruption, what is, whether you call it contingency, whether you call it coincidence, whether you call it chance or accident, what appears as chance is not really chance. What appears as accident is not really accident. Given a different explanation, that it is comprehensible. And that is and how we do it is something which Prabhu is trying to spell out. So, coincidence is therefore linked to the irrational, what appears not rational within. It is linked to the contingent, it is linked to interruptions, it's linked to singularity, it's linked to the individual. And these are the points through which we can enter, where the singular, after explanation, is no longer the singular. But it is singular because it is not comprehensible as just a simple pattern which you can see within the existing structures of explanation. But what happens when you understand the coincidence, when you begin to explain the contingent, and that becomes part of your explanation, then that no longer remains incomprehensible. So we have to then move to other coincidences which require explanation. We have to, because once you establish the relationship between the individual events that you notice and produce a structure, then you have given an explanation, then those events you are explaining will not appear as individual, contingent, coincidental invention to others who read your text. So we have to be wary of being constantly getting integrated into explanatory structure where the coincidence, the search for coincidence stops. Therefore, we have to constantly, what I'm saying is that we have to constantly search for what is incomprehensible, what appears odd, what appears strange. And that's the point of inquiry for a world which is different from ours, and a pattern of thought which doesn't, for an alternative way of looking at the world. Prabhu talked about the deductive, inductive, and abductive reasoning, and he prefers Peirce's notion of abductive reasoning because he thinks that it is, and he thinks that it is, he finds it more adequate to his purposes. And I think there's a point which is, this is again a very important point he's raising, because abductive reasoning, as has been developed by Peirce and subsequently, is seen as first, in a sense, the first stage of an inquiry. A first stage which will be followed by other, it's an exploratory stage. You're trying to make connections. You don't know exactly how to make those connections. And you want to produce some explanatory conjectures. What you produce is tentative, it's open-ended, it's not conclusive. And Peirce is arguing about science, therefore this is followed by more derivative, inductive and derivative, where you prove a thing, where you demonstrate this thing. But for historians, I think, as Prabhu is suggesting, for historians, the abductive reasoning becomes the form of reasoning that we actually work with, operate with. We do not go on to prove, ultimately prove something in our argument. We open up a world, discover meaning, we make sense, and we try and understand the past in the best possible way we can, which makes the traces meaningful, which makes the past comprehensible to us. So therefore, this attempt to work with this heuristic procedure, this explanatory strategy of working with the traces to explain something in a meaningful way is something which I think, which again attracts me. So I think I'll like to stop there, but with one cautionary argument that in developing and thinking about the toolkits with which historians work, like Prabhu is doing, we need to be careful that we don't project the toolkit that we operate with today back into the past. I feel that Prabhu in a sense is doing that. I don't think in the 1970s when we did our early researches, we were thinking about contingency, conjecture, interruptions, all the ideas that have been thrown up by Agnes Heller to Paul Ricoeur to Michel de Certeau to Ginsberg and others. We were still working with notions of structures and systems and trying to develop the most complex argument about whether it's a gradient formation, whether it is patterns of migration. It is in the 80s and 90s, late 80s and 90s, when we begin to read many of these critical theory works, that our ideas change, and we don't adopt them mechanically. We make them our own. We reject some, accept some, criticize some, rework some, refigure some. And in that process, you develop your own toolkit, as Prabhu has done very nicely. He's developed it. But this is a toolkit which I think he worked with perhaps in the 90s, perhaps in the beginning of this century, but not in the 1970s or early 80s. That was still embedded within our earlier frames of reference, where we were trying to rethink Marxist histories in the most creative and critical ways. And therefore there is a tension between that kind of reading of history and our present day toolkits, conceptual toolkits with which we work and operate. And I think that's a productive tension, and we should allow that to remain. We shouldn't repeat in our own reflexive return to self to read our own histories, to produce linear histories which we are criticizing. So there is no linear move from the past to the present, even in Prabhu's or any one of us. Right? There are ruptures, there are interruptions, there are breaks, which we need to think of. But in the end, I'll say, Prabhu, may you continue to be an interloper, and may you continue to resist established ways of thinking. See yourself both as an outsider and insider, and offer creative and meaningful readings of the past in the very many different ways, and the many spaces that you have inhabited, and the many points of focus that you have had in your own writing. Thank you.
I think we should now have some further critiques or points to be made from the floor. Anybody wants to make anything, say anything?
You showed us in a slide that the society was moving from the status-based to contract-based to status-based society. But when we study the history, society always moves from status-based to contract-based. But how you said we were moving from the contract-based? Study the Arab society.
Much more comfortable with that everything that with which we can work with, that which works and produces new meanings, and you can have some discovery. I think that is my touchstone for that. But it doesn't exclude the so-called standard way of, or there is no standard way. I was one after 50 years of being in, or 40 years being in history, I'm quite 100% sure that history has no method, no set method. I don't know whether physics has a method. Devajyoti will say, but I don't know whether physics actually. I'm willing to question that also. Is there a standard set method by which you can generate new discoveries or find new discoveries or find new meanings and all? So history really doesn't have a kind of set method. So we teach courses on historical method. I know what a fraud it is. Though Niladri is actually a brilliant teacher of historical method, is really. But I know it's not that. What I mean is that whatever a distinction which doesn't have really a proper, let's say, standard operating procedure, SOP. We don't have a standard operating, and that allows a little bit of freedom to find new ways of doing things, new ways of finding meaning.
But you know, it doesn't at all exclude the way, you know, nothing takes away the fact that you have to do archival research, you have to find documents, you have to use your creatively, but merely having a lot of document will not produce any history. You have to use them creatively, and this is perhaps one way of doing things. Trying to find, as Niladri says it always much better than I can. I was wanting to say that often the exceptional, the singular often is if you can find that, you can find a way and window into the structure. The deviant, the madman often is more lucid about our society. And if we can reach that level of, we can find that level, we have a much more acute sense of what a society or what a social structure is if we find the deviant and the deviation. And I've done it in many of my work, which is to find that which is not, even though I look for pattern, most of the time I am looking for pattern, but I look for the exceptions all the time. And that exceptions have provided me hundreds of times. The singular, as Neelali said, has given me a lot more pleasure, a lot more insight than just repeating a structural understanding. That is not to say that we shouldn't do it.
So after conjecturing a theory, I would try to see what additional tests can be made on my theory, and I would repeat an experiment. Something that a historian cannot do easily because it takes longer to do that, right? So I would say your idea was a very scientific one and neat. It's very neat. Okay, there's always a chance that we'll go horribly wrong, but that's part of the game. Okay. So I think it was great. And
hello, Prabhu. We live in a time where there are more interlopers than historians. You know, now there are more people writing about history. And when Walter Benjamin writing about control of memory, past, present, the sites which are contesting over history are limited. But we live in a time where sites who are contesting over history is coming from all sides. They are inside the room, they are outside the room, they are on the margin, they are on the tangent, they are everywhere. So if you reflect back on something as you as an interloper doing in 1970s, 80s, learning things, and the time that we are living, how do you reflect back on your own method in the 2024, then 1980s and 1990s?
I'll give one example. This is a thing to remind ourselves of in 1993, I think, when Niladri produced alongside this on the Ayodhya crisis. If you read that essay, what he showed was how those who we think are interlopers actually utilize continuously the methods of so-called methods of history. They are continuously using methods of history in the name of method. You think that they are only merely talking of myths? No. They want concrete. They want concrete evidence. They're putting through concrete. They're using the SOP of history. That is what I think Niladri's essay was so brilliantly showing, that there is, why do they take on this language of history? Why do they need that language if they can do a completely alternative form of history? They don't. So they're not really interloper. They want to be insiders. They want to basically expel us and be the insiders themselves. And so I'd say, but you asked me, I should have ended with that. It was 50 years when I came. I was 15. I came 50 years later. That I came when the emergency was. All I can say today, emergency has not been declared. That's all. Thank you.
No, I don't think it's. I don't have a comment, any question for you. It's just a thanks from the students of yours, because you did talk about your teachers. So it's also
it's our right to also talk about you as a teacher. I mean, I represent something which I happily call myself, like, or many of us, academic destitutes. And Prabhu was the person in the university which has a diverse set of students. And so today we understood, like, you being the interloper could attract different interlopers, which people are coming from the different walks. And when we were students, which was not possible, either you have a teacher like Professor Palat, which is very rigorous with you, or teachers who are not into the students. But it was a fresh air from somebody not coming from the academic, that geography, and find somebody like Prabhu, like, yeah, there are takers for somebody like us. We can be the students and work under Prabhu. And he used to keep asking, "Tu karna kya chahta hai? Tu soch." So the question was not academic, but it made us, and now we are on the other side of the table, that made us to understand, like, we have somebody the takers for us. So thank you, Prabhu, for those many times and years and whatever, beyond classrooms. And I think I'm talking on behalf of most of the students who have been taught by Prabhu. So again, coming from the Ramjas history, so this was the legacy which we grew up in university, where we didn't learn from the classroom, but outside the classroom. I remember about Prabhu used to, in NLI, like, have you studied labor history? Have you studied Karl Ginsburg? Go and study them and everything. So it's a gratitude to you, and which could break those, those hierarchies, which was very much important for the interlopers, future interlopers. And we got to know today that, yeah, this is coming from your being an interloper or not being an interloper. So thank you so much. Thank you so much on behalf of everyone here.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आप सभी का। एक छात्र के रूप में अपने शिक्षक के अंतिम दिन फेयरवेल में के सेमिनार में आप लोग आए। जब मैं यहाँ आया तो किसी ने मुझसे पूछा व्हाट्सएप पे कि कहाँ हो, तो मैंने एक तस्वीर भेज दी। बोले ये क्या है? मैंने कहा किसी का फेयरवेल है। ऐसा कोई फेयरवेल होता है? मैंने कहा हाँ ऐसा होता है, पर ये कौन है? मैंने कहा ये हिस्टोरियन है। अच्छा, मैंने कहा वो तुम टीवी पे जिस हिस्टोरियन को देखते हो वो दूसरे हिस्टोरियन है। ये वाले ऐसे वाले हिस्टोरियन यही मिलते हैं। तो काफी हैरान हो गया, बोला मैंने तो ऐसा कभी कोई फेयरवेल देखा नहीं। मैंने भी ऐसा फेयरवेल नहीं देखा। आप लोगों ने काफी देखा होगा, कई लोगों के फेयरवेल को अटेंड किया होगा आप लोगों ने। पर यही हो रहा था, और कल शाम को मैं अपने एडिट रूम में बैठकर टीवी की आवाज आ रही थी, तो उसमें कोई पार्टी के प्रवक्ता इतिहास पर ज्ञान दे रहे थे। तो मुझे ये लगा कि यहाँ जितने भी लोग जितना भी इतिहास जानते हो, पर इनका जैसे रिन साबुन का रिम बन जाता है, वैसा ही इन लोगों का एक फेक हिस्टोरियन भी है जो टीवी पर दिखता है। क्लासरूम के हिस्टोरियन और हिस्ट्री के स्टूडेंट्स बहुत अलग दिखते हैं। तो मुझे बहुत मजा आ रहा था इस दुनिया और उस दुनिया के बीच में आपके आदान प्रदान के को सुनते हुए कि आप लोग कैसे इंटरैक्ट कर रहे हैं और क्या जवाब इतिहास को लेकर दिया जा रहा है। कम से कम इस कमरे में जितने स्टूडेंट्स हैं वो तो ये शिकायत नहीं कर सकते कि इतिहास हमें पढ़ाया नहीं गया, क्योंकि उन्हें ये बात मालूम है कि पढ़ाने के बाद भी आप सारा इतिहास नहीं पढ़ पाए। और जो भी आगे अपने जीवन में इतिहास पढ़ेंगे तो वो उस विशाल विषय का एक छोटा सा धागा होगा जिसको पकड़कर आप उसमें उसकी तफ्तीश में लग जाएंगे, उसके विशेषज्ञ बनेंगे, उसके रिश्तों की पड़ताल करेंगे। पर अब ये बाहर सड़कों पर मुझे बहुत लोग मिलते हैं, कहते हैं इतिहास हमें पढ़ाया नहीं गया। जैसे पढ़ाई को लेकर उनके साथ सबसे बड़ी बेईमानी यही की गई कि उन्हें इतिहास नहीं पढ़ाया गया, वरना तो वो एकदम झोला लेकर आए थे, बताइए किताब का लिस्ट हम खरीद कर इतिहास पढ़ने वाले। कई लोगों से पूछता हूँ कि आपने कोई किताब खरीदी हो अपने जीवन में इतिहास की, तो बताइए। नहीं खरीदी हो, पढ़ने का शौक है तो विषय बताइए, मैं कुछ किताबें भेज देता हूँ। तब जवाब बंद हो जाता है। फिर कहते इतना सारा लिखने की क्या जरूरत है, और आपके घर में इतनी किताबें क्यों? मैंने कहा ये इतिहास की है जो आपको पढ़ाया नहीं गया। और मैं भी नहीं पढ़ पाया, किताब ही खरीदता रह जाता हूँ। तो हम एक ऐसे समय में हैं। अच्छा लगा कि आप लोग अपने विषय के प्रति आपके सवालों से और आखिर के 2 सवालों को सुनकर मुझे लगा कि कितनी श्रद्धा है अपने विषय में और विषय के अनुशासन को लेकर जो सवाल आप पूछ रहे हैं। लेकिन जब आप बाहर जाएं तो ये जरूर बताएं कि इतिहास जब हम पढ़ रहे थे तो यही समझ में आया कि बहुत पढ़ना पड़ता है। इसमें कोई एक निष्कर्ष पर आप जीवन में अंतिम बार के लिए नहीं पहुंच पाते हैं। हो सकता है कोई दूसरा नजरिया लेकर सामने आ रहा होता है। तो हम लोग अपने ही विषय को हमसे ही कोई छीनकर मैदान में दूसरे गेंद का दूसरा रूप बनाकर उससे खेल रहा है और हम कुछ कर नहीं पा रहे हैं। तो हमारे इतिहास को, हमारे विषय को लेकर राजनीति पहले भी हुई है, होती भी रहेगी, उससे भागने बचने की जरूरत नहीं है। जैसा कि नीलाद्री ने कहा कि मंदिर के विध्वंस को जरूरी नहीं कि हम आज के संदर्भ में जिस तरह से दिखाने की कोशिश हो रही है उसी संदर्भ में देखें, सही गलत को सही करने के जुनून को पैदा कर दें और समाज में एक ऐसी स्थिति पैदा कर दें कि आप एक दूसरे के खिलाफ हो जाएं, नफरत हो जाए, बढ़ जाए और आप एक दूसरी दिशा में चले जाएं। तो वो इतिहास हमें बचाता है इन सब चीज़ों से कम देखना सिखा देता है। जिन लोगों ने इतिहास नहीं पढ़ा और इतिहास का आदर नहीं किया वही टीवी पर बैठकर इतिहास का ज्ञान दे रहे हैं। और मुझे पता है कि वो कभी भी इतिहास अब पढ़ने वाले नहीं, क्योंकि उन्हें पता था। उन्हें जब पढ़ने का मौका मिला, क्योंकि उनके बाद से लगता है कि उन्होंने पूंजी का इस्तेमाल ज्यादा किया। थोड़ा बहुत तो सब कोई कर लेता है, लेकिन उन्होंने कुछ ज्यादा किया, इसलिए वो इतने बेबाकीपन से कह सकते हैं, कुछ भी इतिहास को लेकर दावा कर सकते हैं। पर यहाँ बैठे हुए जिन्होंने 40 साल अपनी जिंदगी एक विषय पर लगाया, एक लाइन आप चाहे प्रभु, माधवन हैं या नीलाद्री की बातों से आप निकाल कर नहीं कह सकते कि उन्होंने एक भी लाइन इस दावे के साथ कही हो कि ये अंतिम सत्य है। और यही जो हम कह रहे हैं यही मानना पड़ेगा। यही अंतर है यहाँ के इतिहास की ट्रेनिंग में और वहाँ के इतिहास की ट्रेनिंग में। तो आप धारा, विषय, निष्कर्ष किसी भी तरीके से पहुंचे, जिस नदी में चलना है उस नदी का कायदा तो आपको मालूम होना चाहिए। नाव तो जैसे चलती है वैसे ही चलानी पड़ेगी। दिशाएं आपको कहीं और ले जाएं वो अलग बात है। तो इस विषय को बचाइए। और ऐसे अच्छे शिक्षकों को देखकर मेरा तो दिल भर आया। आज फिर मुझे लग रहा है कि काश मैं भी टीचर हो जाता। तो खैर ये अफसोस जिंदगी में होते रहना चाहिए, पर बहुत मजा आया।
The fact is, Ravish is a student of our department.
हमारे स्टूडेंट है, डिपार्टमेंट का हिस्ट्री का स्टूडेंट है। अब इस पे इतना गर्व है हमारे इतना गर्व है कि स्टूडेंट and he is fighting a battle which we can't even imagine. We are in a march, and I am so happy that you are able to do it. My students can see you, can always they always listen to you, but to understand your point of view and to fact that you have still maintained and retained an affiliation to the discipline of history, and that has shaped your way, isn't it?
हाँ,
आपका
बिल्कुल
आज तक वही जो भी है। मैं जानता हूँ बीए से सुब्रता के स्टूडेंट है, रविश इज सुब्रता स्टूडेंट, सुब्रता, राणा, all the history students from history, he learned history, and I still feel whatever are terrible times you have lived in, कुछ तो अच्छा किया होगा कि रविश जैसा ऐसा तो terrible, हम जानते हैं क्या हो रहा है, घटिया पढ़ाई हो रहा है, ये हो रहा है, but something is there ना, it comes out।
घटिया पढ़ाई तो नहीं थी। मैं आज भी बहुत प्राउडली कहता हूँ कि मुझे वर्ल्ड क्लास टीचर्स ने पढ़ाया है। और ये मैं कहीं भी जाता हूँ तो कई क्लासेस में बैठने का मौका मिला है, मुझे पता चल जाता है कि मैं किसी भी लेसर बैकग्राउंड से नहीं आता। मैं गणित में जरूर बहुत कमजोर था, तो लगा था कि मेरा जीवन में कुछ नहीं होगा। बहुत बाद में पता चला कि जो भी हुआ वो इतिहास के कारण है। तो ये जो पढ़ाई की जो ट्रेनिंग थी और पढ़ने की जो ट्रेनिंग थी, उसका बहुत फायदा हुआ। आज भी मुझे वो काम आता है, और आपको भी अगले 40 साल तक, क्योंकि ये देश एक लंबे समय के लिए एक ऐसे दलदल में गया है कि जहां आपकी भूमिका आपको रोज चुनौती देगी कि आपको ही कुछ करना है इस इतिहास को लेकर। बच के तो अब हम भाग नहीं सकते इससे। अब जैसा भी है, जैसे भी रूप में सामने है, उससे हमको भागना है। मैं अपनी बात खत्म करूंगा इस बात के साथ कि थैंक यू प्रभु, प्रभु नहीं होने के लिए। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।
Something, a message sent by Uma Chakravarti. She really wanted. So I want to say that Ravish, even suno Uma ne kya likha hai, Uma Chakravarti. I tried very hard to come, but the notice was too short. But if you can read out this message, I will feel participated. I would have liked to have been present today, but I have not been able to personally join you all. I want to celebrate Prabhu's retirement with a recall of the long history of engagement of DU Department of History, and especially its colleges, which don't get enough acknowledgement as centers that have created amazing historians. The excitement of teaching and learning history was transformed radically in the 70s and early 80s when the undergrad syllabus was revised by the youngest of all the college teachers. I recall a group of 15 or more teachers who read everything that went into the syllabus, that now focused on social formations rather than discrete papers that had no link to each other. And out of that exercise came what is referred to as the best undergraduate syllabus in history across the world. Many of the young teachers or research students contributed to this effort. When periodization was tweaked, papers were dumped and others were introduced. In order to teach these new courses, students and faculty might move from one college to the other, which I don't think we have done thereafter. That means people were teaching, people are coming, students are coming from different places to listen to. It is courses like these which young teachers taught in colleges across the campus that produce journalists like Ravish Kumar. This has not been said, I'm saying. Apart from Gen Next historians, Gen Next, and though there have been onslaughts on the spirited community of historians, we haven't given up. Let's celebrate history. Today, as we say, adieu to Prabhu. As my students of Gen 3 said recently by way of a logo on the back, they designed, Jeena Marna Itihas ke saath, picture abhi baki hai.
Thank you so much.
I'll miss you all. I'll miss my colleagues a lot. I'll miss my students.
So, as Uma said, picture खत्म नहीं हुई है, picture बाकी है और शायद नई pictures शुरू होंगी. So I really hope to see more of Prabhu. Not like we should not be celebrating his journey, and we are also anticipating many new beginnings. And I thank Prabhu. Thanks a lot to Madhavan Palat and Lajvi Bhattacharya for this amazing session.